All right, today I've got part two of how to improve your piano playing. Now, if I believe correctly, in part one, I basically just talked about learning and becoming familiar with all the different notes and the names of the notes on the board. And then once you get down the notes, then you want to go ahead and start practicing your natural major scales because a lot of songs and a lot of music is all being played based off those major scales. And if you learn those major scales, you really will be able to develop and you will start to see growth because from those major scales, you'll be able to do stuff like, for example, I play in a band, and one thing that we do is we use a lot of numbers. And the reason why we use numbers, which is what I'm talking about today in part two, is becoming familiar with the number system. Because let's say, for example, you're trying to learn something from somebody and they're communicating a song with you. I know for me personally, the best thing that really helped me take my piano playing to the next level and that really helped me develop and become a better player was to get familiar with the number system. And the reason why is because, let's say, for example, we're playing Made Away in the key of C. Okay. For me, it's a lot more beneficial to use the number system because instead of just calling out specific chords, like for say, since it's on the one, instead of me saying C major, then instead of me saying G major over a B note, and then back to C major, and then to tell somebody to go to F major, it makes a lot more sense, and it's a lot more beneficial for the long term and flexibility in your playing to use numbers because number one, if you use numbers, you can take those numbers and you can put it in any key, and you can relate that over to all musicians rather than just having to go over the specific chord names, and it takes longer to say those. But if you use the numbers, you can always reference it back to your scales. So, for example, since it's on the one, if you know your C major scale, that's going to do you a whole lot of good when you're learning those chords because if you know your scale, the one is major, you can build a major triad. If you know your scale, you can build the five, which is a five chord, which is a major chord in that same key in root position. And then you can also go back to the one, if you're familiar with your scale, and also the four. Here it is in root position. But that all just comes from your scale, and you would only really truly know how to do that in every key if you knew your scales and you got familiar with the number system. Now, the other thing that I wanted to talk about was understanding and how to really build a major triad because that's what I use and a lot of other beginning musicians use in order to, finally feel like they can play a song. And that's really on the simplest level. You can really do a lot with triads, and they really will take you far because you can play a lot of songs with triads. So I'm going to continue to use Made Away as an example of how you can use these triads to be better. So basically, if we just take on the simplest level, probably the most basic chord is just a C major chord. It's just a C, an E, and a G. Now, how you get these major chords that everybody loves is I'm going to reference everything back to the scale because it's a great point to start and you really can do a lot with those. So, a major triad is just the one of a scale, whatever key you're in. That's why I use numbers because you can take it and do it in C, you can do it in C sharp, you can do it in D, you can do it in E flat, you can do it in E. You can do it in any key if I use numbers. So if you're on the C major scale, to get a triad, it's just the one, the first note of the scale, the three of the scale, and the five of whatever scale you're on. And that's how you get a triad, and you just take that triad and you just put it together, and that's how you make a major chord. Now, on my left hand, usually all I do is I usually will just do the one with my five finger, and then I usually will just do the five of whatever chord I'm on. So since I'm on the one, got the one and then the five, and then maybe sometimes depending on the chord I'm on, I'll just throw in that other octave in there with my left hand. So that's how you make a major triad. It's just 1, 3, 5 of whatever key you're in and whatever scale you're doing. And then to make a minor triad, all that is you just take that same scale and it's the 1, the flat 3, and then the 5. So really all you have to do is you can keep your your 1 and your 5 there, and you just take that 3 and you just take it down a half step. And in order to get in half step, all you do is, this is how I like to communicate it. If I'm trying to make a jump and go from C right up to D, that's a whole step, because I skipped the very middle pitch. The very next pitch and the very next note to C is C sharp, and then a whole step is D. So in order to get a half step, I would go from C to C sharp, which is the very next pitch. So in order to get that half step, to get it from a C major chord to a C minor chord, you just take that 3 and you just go to the very next note down. And that's how you get a minor chord. And really, those are really the only triads that you're going to really need to start out. And you can go a long way with those triads and the number system, because something like Made Away, if I was trying to communicate it with another musician, I wouldn't call out the chord names. I'd give them the numbers so that then they could take it and make it their own, and then use those numbers in all 12 keys, rather than only really knowing those specific chord names in whatever key they're in. Because if I only ever told you, okay, Made Away is C, it's G over B, it's C again, and then it's F. If somebody wanted you to play that song in its original key, which is B, then what are you going to do then? If you only ever knew those specific chords. But if I give you the numbers and I tell you it's 1, I tell you it's 5 over 7, I tell you it's 1, and then it's 4. If you know your scale in B, then you can take your scale in B, and then you could take those same numbers and you could just apply that same theory. 1, 5 over 7, 1, 4, and you can do that in all 12 keys if you become familiar with the number system, and it really makes it beneficial for becoming more fluent and becoming a better piano player, because you'll also be able to play in all 12 keys if you use the number system. So that's my video for today, and I really hope you guys enjoyed this lesson, and I hope that you can take the knowledge that I've provided today and use it to become a better player. So just remember, when you're practicing these things, also always remember that if you're practicing, you definitely want to make sure that it's challenging, because if you're doing something that you're really, really comfortable with, you're not practicing, you're just rehearsing. So make sure that you also use a metronome when you practice your scales, and just gradually grow faster and faster until you can do it smooth with both hands. And also make sure that you're using the correct fingering as well, because that stuff will pay off in the long run when you're trying to do lines and stuff like that, playing those bigger chords. You're going to make sure that you're using the right fingering, or else it's going to be really, really difficult, or maybe you won't even be able to do it at all. So thank you guys.